Welcome to Live with Thrive, the podcast dedicated to empowering Black and Brown women who are navigating the complexities of balancing womanhood, motherhood, and career. I am your host, Dr. Alison Harris Welcher, creator of Thrive Life Coaching. In each episode, we dive into uplifting conversations with trailblazing women who share their transformative journeys and powerful strategies for thriving in every area of life. If you're juggling a demanding career, family responsibilities, or aiming for personal growth, this podcast provides the inspiration and actionable insights you need. Join us as we celebrate the strength, resilience, and achievements of everyday Black and Brown women just like you. Together, we'll explore how to not just survive, but truly thrive in every aspect of your journey. Welcome to Live with Thrive. This is a very special episode between Live with Thrive and Behind the Throne. I'm your host, Dr. Alison Harris Welcher, and I'm so excited to be welcomed by Helen Kimbrough and Charlitta Hatch. Welcome, ladies. How you doing?
Thank you. Good morning.
Here. Hi. I am so excited about this conversation. Today, we are going to be talking about just motherhood, identity, the power of community. And the beauty of this particular conversation is that we are having it across different generations of women. We are at different stages of our motherhood. And so I'm really excited about what we're going to glean in this conversation and learn. But first, let's get started. I want the audience just to learn a little bit about each of you. Please just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your podcast, because again, this is the first collaboration podcast between Behind the Throne and Live with Thrive. So tell us just a little bit about yourself. Helen, we'll start with you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Kimbrough, co-host of the Behind the Throne podcast. And a little bit about me. I'm a proud wife. I'm a mom. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I would say cherished friend in some circles, and love family. And so a little bit about what I do is I am in the social impact consulting space. And so my role in that space is as Senior Director of Community Voice. So that just means I'm always looking to amplify voices and uplift voices. I'm also a publisher, and so I am an author. And again, I am a podcast co-host with my friend Charlitta.
Well, I guess that goes back to me. So good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I am Charlitta from Charlotte, and I am also a proud wife, married to my high school sweetheart. I have two little people, a 3-year-old who's almost 4, who's almost 25, and I have an 8-year-old sweet little boy who knows everything and thinks I know nothing. I am type A, psycho, Gemini. We just need to start with that. And with that, I am in the best career that I can be in. I have been a consultant for over 20 years in a variety of sectors. And I always, when I explain it to my son, I'm like, I get paid to tell people what I think they should do. And you're going to see a lot of that today. I have very strong opinions that I like to just get out there. And I always say, take it, right size it for your life, but you'll never have to guess where you stand with me.
Right size it.
Yeah, right size it. That's the consultant speak.
Right size. I love a good right size.
Helen published my books, which is, has been such a blessing for me in kind of starting out in, my passion for Black boys and literacy, which I share with Helen. And when you think about our podcast, Behind the Throne, you really hit the head on the nail, because we're a multi-generational podcast between myself and Helen. representing Black motherhood and all the different multifacets that we are. We cannot be boxed in. So we're not just moms, we're not just community leaders, we're not just consultants, not just publishers. We are just multifaceted, and you see that. You'll see that today. You'll see that if you listen to other episodes. And we're really focused on, reflections of motherhood and how that intersects in a variety of different issues, whether it's at work, at home, or in the community.
Absolutely.
Love it. Love it. Well, please, audience, be sure to follow Behind the Throne. You see the tag there. I'm curious, ladies, what are you excited most about collaborating on this conversation today as we jump in?
I would say for me, it's basically for us to just show up authentically and with intention. We have to sometimes present ourselves, I feel like, in alternate ways when we're out in the world. Sometimes that's how we feel like we should be. But in this particular space today, we don't have to do that. We can really be ourselves. And even us joining, early before we turn the cameras on, we were already ourselves, just, having this girl magic about ourselves. And so I would like for that to maintain throughout. So that's what I'm excited about.
Love it. Love it.
I'm excited about really talking through the identities in an authentic way. I think so often as Black women, as mothers, as, community leaders, as workers, we're often having to wear a mask. And you'll keep hearing me say, like, just embracing the multifacetedness that we bring, because we do get boxed in. And then when we're boxed in, people are trying to fit us into that box or fit us into that one thing. And I think us kind of peeking behind the throne so that we can all thrive, I think that is what we'll be able to do in this conversation, to say, let's take the mask off and say what it really means to be a Black woman, a Black leader, and a Black mother in this space. And how can you do all three?
Yeah.
All three and then some.
Yes,
all of it, right?
Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's dive in.
Fantastic. So we want to start out talking a little bit about motherhood and identity. And I think this is something specifically that Charlitta and I spend a lot of time talking about is, not only how we show up, but who are we like in this moment? And so for some of us, when it comes to motherhood, it really is about the changing or the transformation or the evolution as to how we appear inside of motherhood. But not just that journey, also the journey of how it shows up in our family, or how it shows up in our friend group, or how it shows up at work, or how it shows up in our community and respective spaces. And so we literally want to just, think about that and think about the role from the beginning as well as the end, and also the transformation throughout. So a little bit about just in talking about stages, what were some of the biggest identity shifts that you experienced when you became a mom? And I'll share that. I know I hear from Charlitta all the time, but let's start with you.
Yeah. So, as I think about my motherhood journey, one important element of it is that I did become a mother. I gave birth 2 months before the start of the pandemic. And so no one could have ever imagined, right, literally what would take place just 2 months after my son was born in January 2020. And so that does play quite a bit into the shifts that I experienced. But even beyond that, one of the things as already a leader and a professional in my career, I often separated my personal and my professional extremely. Like when I showed up at work, that was work. I had to get it done. I was a very young leader. I became a principal of a school at 27 years old. So I made clear the lines of like, when I'm here, we getting it done. And when I'm at home and out and about and doing my thing, I'm doing that. And those lines got very blurred. And I struggled with that quite a bit. And where I am now, 5 years into motherhood, my oldest is 5, I parent out loud. I mother out loud. And it feels so great to do that. it's hard to explain why I was so, guarded in that way. I think I had my reasons for sure. But now as I shift in motherhood, I've become very confident in the fact that I have other priorities that are beyond this job. My job is important. I'm a great leader. I've excelled. Love that for myself. And also, I am a mama. And so my identity shifted in not just being solely focused on work and that being something that was really a priority and a major piece of my life, but it really being, it's a part of, and I am a mother, and me just dealing with the fact that motherhood is messy. It's not always perfect. I may have a whole week planned out and baby boy done got sick on a Tuesday night. Meetings got to be canceled, got to shift stuff around, stuff is messy. And so I've become a lot more flexible, a lot more willing to kind of go with the flow and adapt, which is hard for me as a type A person, a structured, I like planning. So it has truly changed how I show up.
Well, one thing that I was thinking when you said that, Allison, is, when you talked about why were you so kind of like boundary driven, I think it goes back to that box because you wanted people to see you as a young Black female leader in the way in which you think people would respect that. So if you were actually your authentic self, would people respect you the same? Would people say, oh, look, she's just so young, she this or whatever? And I've dealt with that as well. And actually, I feel like I still deal with that, even though I'm 41, in relation to kind of my peers, at work, where I'm like, no, I'm going to be my authentic self. I'm not going to be who you are or who you think I should be in this space.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Allison, I want to know, like, what was that shift? Like, what was that defining moment that you said, you know what? I got to show up as me.
Ooh, I will say, I almost remember, again, the pandemic set up a different, nursing my son, putting the camera up on the laptop and like, look, y'all, I can't keep separate. I'm literally nursing my baby hungry. We're not sending him, we didn't send him to daycare for the first 18 months of his life. And it's like, I can't keep doing this in this way. So that was a very acute moment, but that was the shift was like, and quite honestly, the aha is like, I work with other women who are mothers. Like, and quite honestly, I think society, like, we don't do it well. We assume mothers show up and they had a great night of rest, 8 hours, right? We assume mothers show up and didn't have to fight with their 3-year-old to get dressed in the morning, right? There's all these things. And so, but in that moment, literally 3 months into motherhood, having gone back to work and needing to nurse my child, I'm like, I'm not going to keep, because my baby needs me right now. And even obviously that I'm not nursing anymore, they still need me in different ways. And so
it feels like you are in a different way.
Exactly. Right. In a different way.
Get away from me.
Exactly. And so it was just that moment that I was like, I can't keep playing this mental gymnastics for myself. Right. And it just felt so relieving and feels so relieving.
I was getting ready to say liberation, girl. You liberated yourself that day.
Yeah. Because I said, wait a minute now. We 3 months in, but we're not going to keep doing because I'm in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
Moment. Now, it wasn't, and to be honest, it wasn't, I didn't become 100% confident at that moment. I do remember the moment 3 months in, but it was over time. And I had to work through it of like, ooh, I'm changing. This is different. Let me try this on for size. 5 years in, I'm like, bet, like, whatever, it is what it is. That was the moment.
I tell people all the time, I have not slept through the night since second trimester of my first son, who's 8 years old. I don't think I've had like a full night of not being interrupted in some way in that long. So I hear you on there. The other thing that I was going to offer is I had a similar liberation moment. But what I find interesting is that I couldn't do it for myself. You did it for yourself. So I had returned back to work after taking a 20-week maternity leave, which was very much a privilege. And I was in a meeting with clients, and I needed to pump, and it was getting very visible because your clothes don't fit right, and I wasn't leaking, but it was obviously like the swelling, and I didn't want to walk out because I didn't want to draw attention to why she walking out of the meeting. The client's here, and my counterparts were in the room.
Mhm.
And this guy pinged me, and he says, "No one is going to give you permission to leave. Just leave." And one, notice how uncomfortable I must have been looking and how much fidgeting I was doing. But it was like him giving me permission, which is a whole nother thing with the patriarchy, right? But like he gave me permission by telling me no one was going to give me permission. I walked out. I pumped. The meeting was still going on. No one talked about the fact that I walked out of the meeting. And that moment really freed me in so many ways that like it is fine and it is okay. I'm in my own way.
Yeah. And and then it had to be a gentleman who saw that, right? One of your colleagues who saw it as well. But I'm glad he gave you, that liberating moment for you too, so you could go and do, and then shift your thinking around what you need to do for yourself, like in that moment, right?
And it's something I tell so many moms that I talk to who return back to work. I give them that same line. No one is going to give you permission to leave, to pick up your kid early, to take off when they're sick. Like you just have to do it and own it, and it will be fine. But you have to do it without all the disclaimers, without all the apologies, without all of those things. Just do it. Because think about how many men do things.
Without question.
And think about our husbands. Let's just start there. How many times do they apologize for walking out to go somewhere, right? And then we are like, "I'm sorry, I want to go get my nails done. Can you?" It's on us.
Yeah. Own it and advocate for ourselves. Yeah, I love that. Now, Helen, you're in a different stage of motherhood, right? So you have two grown
I am. I'm here with the young girls on here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with the young girls.
But still giving millennial.
Yes, very much millennial, very much. I'm curious about the identity shifts that you experienced and perhaps even the time it took for you to reclaim that identity after the early years of motherhood, because Charlitta and I are still like in the early years. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old. She's got almost 4 and an 8-year-old. So we're on that early end.
Yes. And I have a 27 and a 22-year-old. So that lets you know we're on different spectrums of the motherhood journey. And one of the things that I will say is starting my journey, I was kind of pushed into being in a different identity because, working in corporate, that was my identity. But then when my older son was born, he was born sick. And I tell people all the time, I, didn't make enough money to afford a nanny. And I didn't live near any family members. And so literally it was just me and my husband. And so I made the decision, and collectively we jointly made the decision for me to stay home with my son. And to me, that was a shift for us because it was something that my mom had worked her whole life. I had never really seen it, and I had never seen it modeled. And then when people would ask me, what do I do for a living? I didn't know what to say. Oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And because I had been a corporate, person, leader inside of the community. And so that really probably started my journey into really understanding who I am and who I was then. But then my only sole goal at that point was I literally just wanted my son to be healthy. That was my only. So you're talking about, what was the epiphany for you, Dr. Allison? But for me, it literally was, I would like for my son to be healthy. And I'm just going to ask God, if I make this sacrifice, will he do that? And not only did he do it, he completely healed him. Now, it took like 3 years for that to happen. And so in the middle of that time, I was a stay-at-home mom. Then I started working pharmaceutical sales, part-time when he was starting to get healthy. And then after that, going into full-time pharmaceutical sales when he was, back where he could go to daycare. But that was a struggle and that was a challenge. But the other thing that I learned in that journey is I also knew that I needed the flexibility. Like I could no longer be like in that HR space that I was, previously. I need more flexibility as a mom to do certain things because, like we mentioned earlier, kids get sick, kids have activities, things occur, and I needed to abruptly be able to assist and do some of that. So that was on the front end. And then I would say going through that journey with me having to, kids leaving and now with me being an empty nester, I actually grieved. And I feel like it was a strong grief moment where, your older son leaves off and goes to school, and then your younger son goes off and goes to school. And what I mean by school is college. And I knew in that moment that it was going to be different. I knew it was going to shift. I knew that it was going to change. And I also knew that, wow, my husband and I, we've been parenting these kids and doing all the things the kids want to do. And maybe, in some degree, putting ourselves on the back burner and not, prioritizing just because the older they get, the more things that they're involved in. Mm-hmm. I literally was like in the bed, just crying. My husband was like, what is going on with you? I said, I'm having a grief moment. You're not going to take this moment from me. I got to cry. I got to cry. Mm-hmm. And I ended up creating these mementos to send to him in the mail. So he would have those for my younger son on his journey into this whole new military lifestyle that he was venturing into, which was also different for me in understanding that. So that's why I tell moms, as hard as it is, enjoy the moment because it does go by so quickly. And then when you look, you're like, man, hooray, I'm an empty nester, but man, I miss y'all. So it's kind of a
so powerful. It is so helpful just to hear the authentic journey. I mean, you mentioned just having never seen, another stay-at-home mom. And one of the things I'm learning early in motherhood is the power of stories and hearing things almost in real time before you face them. You don't know what you're going to face as a mother. You have no idea what your journey is going to be. And I truly believe between your podcast, Behind the Throne, and Thrive Life Coaching, Live with Thrive podcast, that we're really revealing stories that women really need to hear. Because otherwise, how would we know?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the powerful things about us, collaborating today is lifting those stories up and knowing that we are not alone. We've gone through this before. Now, when we started the journey, but pre-motherhood, we may have had some things that we kind of said to ourselves and under our breath about mothers. But then once we were on the other side, it shifted, it changed. It was like, look, how can I be on your team? I need you to be on my team. So all of those things. Yep, absolutely. Charlitta, I do want to ask you a specific question. And it is in relation to, you mentioned your maternity leave and how extensive it was, but you've also mentioned to us and to Dr. Allison is, you were in therapy for your maternity leave as well, because you needed to kind of redefine or reframe your thoughts around motherhood. So can you speak a little bit about that and what did that teach you?
Well, one thing that we should all just agree on as a guiding principle is I was the perfect mother before I had children. And so because I was so perfect and I knew how perfect my mothering was going to be and how perfect my children were going to be and how different my husband and I will be compared to all the other couples who didn't have good communication, unlike us, when reality set in, I was completely thrown for a loop. Because of kind of the high achieving, type A, also have anxiety, kind of all those things coupled together with my ideals of what I was going to be and how I was going to show up. When that baby came, it just threw me for a loop. And I tell people all the time, physically, I was fine. My baby was fine. He was crying a lot, But I think some people say that's what babies do, you know? So he was crying a lot. But I just could not understand the view and the vision that I had, coupled with what I saw in social media, versus the peace that I felt like my friends were giving off about how they were navigating motherhood. And then the chaos that I felt was happening in my home, in my brain, in my heart, in my emotions. And when I first kind of realized that I needed to go to therapy, there was a night where I just woke up in a panic. And I had decided that my son had been kidnapped. And I was running around the house. Again, not making any logical sense, because a normal person probably would go into their son's room, see him sleeping peacefully in the bed, and then go back and get in the bed. That's not what I did. I was literally running around the house looking to see what windows were open, to see who came into the house to get him. And that next day, I'm like, I need to go get into therapy. So I get into therapy, and then my husband's going back and forth with me to therapy, because also I feel like what people don't talk about is you're like rebirthing. So when you talk about your identity, like your kid is born, but then you're reborn. Your husband's now a father. You're now parents and husband and wife. And so I'm looking at him like, wait a minute. Like, I thought we were spiritually yoked, and I thought we had the same character values, but you don't get to double click when you're in premarital counseling, right? Like, so you're like, we both believe in Jesus, we both here at home, you know, all of this. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you believe in letting babies cry? Wait a minute. You don't think that you got to change the diaper every time it's wet? Like, so I'm like, I don't know if we were supposed to really get married and have a baby. And so I'm questioning all of those things, on top of the fact that I'm not perfect. I don't know what I'm doing. It seems like nobody can help me. Everybody's calling me, talking about what a joy and a blessing it is. No one's asking me how I'm doing, because I'm falling apart. And then my husband's over here like, let that baby cry. So we go into therapy. And that was the best decision. And even though my husband wanted us to have like kids back to back, I am so thankful to him for loving me enough. And when I told him, like, we can have another baby right now, but I don't know if I could be here. Like, that's how much in the trenches I felt. Like, I don't know that I could be a mentally and whole, healthy wife and mom if we bring another kid into this world. And he gave me the space for as long as I needed it to like navigate this new version of myself that I was not prepared for, that I did not expect, what it meant to be a working mother, what it meant to be a mom and a wife, what it meant to have the first grandchild on both sides of the family, and to unlearn that I needed to be some perfect kind of martyr. And I'm still working through that. I don't think I will ever be done with that journey, but going into that therapy really helped me to see that it is okay to not be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your vulnerability around it too, because again, moms, you do feel like you're in the trenches, and sometimes we don't ask for help, but we definitely need support and we need help. And thankfully, you reached out to get the kind of support and help that you needed, because both of us have talked about having it at different points in our motherhood journey. And so, of course, I definitely believe in going to therapy and have done it. And so those who feel like you need to, I want to let you know there is nothing wrong with going to see a therapist for whatever you feel like you need it for. Know that you are supported and you will be supported in this journey. So I wanted to preface that.
Yeah, Helen, and I'm so glad you shared that and put out there, like, seek the support. And Charlitta, again, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. I do feel like, again, like, society will tell us, particularly in the Black community, some of the things we may have learned growing up, and we're in a different age and time, right? Like, I truly believe that, yes, prayer is great. And we also have resources, experts. And so I also want to impress upon folks, there are therapists specifically for mothers, right? for folks who are going, whether it's, before birth or, after you've given birth. I've recently had guests from Raising Resilience on, and these are two women, Whitney and Tiffany, who specifically focus on women who are navigating motherhood. And so it's hard to go to therapy if you've never been, because you're not sure what to expect, but know that there are folks out there who do have the expertise and really do want to help.
Absolutely.
And so often we talk about, the generations before us, and then we start to feel like, why am I so inadequate? If women were having babies in slavery, 13, 14, 15 kids.
Yeah.
And what I would argue is that they died early.
Mm-hmm.
Some women left their families, and we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah.
Women were committed, right? Because that's what men would go off and put them in. If you read stories of women who, people who recall their mothers just sitting in their room in a catatonic state. Mm-hmm. And so, then in the Black community, we'll say, well, they just special, or there's something wrong, or we just got to pray that spirit out of them. Mm-hmm. And I think we're learning now that, yes, they did it. But what we don't have privy to is how they got through it, and did they get through it? And we can't let that be us. We have way more knowledge and resources, and faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, that's from the word of the book of Charlitta Hatch, y'all.
Yeah. Well, I'm also a street minister, so yes. Multifaceted.
Love it.
No, I know. So I appreciate you sharing that as we talk about identity. And I think, next up, we just really want to talk about, how to navigate, marriage and motherhood, and how we've done that appropriately. So I'll toss it over to you, Alison.
Yeah. Well, you all have mentioned, you all are both married, and in our pre-call, we learned that we are all married to men of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. Now, mind you, I have never met these ladies in person ever. But the Lord has a way. He has a way. So we have the pleasure of being married. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary.
Me too.
Anniversary. I think you guys have some synergy going on. Okay, we got 10-year anniversaries.
Yes.
I'm 30.
30 in the game.
Yes.
Yes. And so we know, marriage is hard work. You mentioned premarital counseling, Charlitta. So, you go in knowing when you are combining two individuals, becoming one, it's going to take some work. And we recognize that. And then you add some children to the mix, some babies, some newborns, right? And it takes it to a whole new level. And being a wife, right? Being a wife in a marriage, doing your part to make the marriage work, and motherhood is extremely demanding. It just takes a lot emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so we got to figure out how to do this while keeping little humans alive. And so, I want to start with what was most surprising in the shift that occurred in your relationship? Both of you have kind of alluded to this, but after becoming parents, what was surprising about how your marriage and your partnership shifted with your husbands?
I'll let you start, Charlitta, because I'm letting Charlitta start on this question because, her question is, how do you keep the marriage alive? How do you keep with children? So I want to give her the honor of going first, because she already knows what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Well, Helen, and we're going to come to you because you are the wise one. You are
exactly.
We make it to 30 and beyond.
That part. I would say, I think the one thing that I feel like we do talk about is marriage being work, and I just couldn't connect with that. Mm-hmm. And for me, I have to say marriage is effort and intention. Mm-hmm. And I think it is so easy to become roommates and just kind of go in parallel. And so the work part to me is effort, intention, and how do you intentionally carve out time for your spouse, the effort that you put into it, especially if you have someone like me who's pretty easygoing. And so with that, even though he's a Kappa, he's not super high maintenance.
Yeah.
And so, it's the effort and intention piece for me. And I would say both times when we had our kids and within that kind of first year to 18 months, I feel like Mark fought for us. And it wasn't really me. Because again, I was just looking at him like he was definitely from Mars, and he was intentional about, we have to go out, we have to step away, we have to not talk about the kid or whatever it was. Like, he really was the one who kind of brought us back together both times, because I was in such a deep mama mode that, and because again, he's not somebody who complains a lot. So I just was like tunnel vision into that baby. And even though people tell you not to do that, I was doing that. And both times Mark did it. And so I always give other guys the advice is to be Mark and to see your wife for your wife, because everybody else, including the kids, are seeing her as a mom, not as an individual. And like, you get to see her as a wife. And so you be that person, because you can't breastfeed. So you might as well see her as a wife. So that's how it was for us. I could take no credit, because if it was up to me, we'd probably be in therapy again.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Helen, what would you offer to this?
Well, like when I initially saw this question, and it was like, what were some of the things that surprised you? For me, it wasn't even about like the marriage. It was my time and my sleep. Like, I missed those things like the most. And I mentioned, earlier that, and I shared this on our podcast too, like, and, probably some aunt advice as well. Take care of yourself first. So I don't believe I can fully be into something if I'm not taking care of myself first. And so for me, it literally was about, I need time, I need space, I need sleep, because I need to show up and take care of myself so I can show up in this marriage, so I can show up as a mom and as a wife. And so I think sometimes, it's the focus of, what about the marriage? What about the marriage? Here I am. And I'm like, what about me? And even in my child rearing, I mean, there was a point in time where there was not going to be the open door bathroom situation going on. I stopped that early. I was like, no, because I need my private time. And my husband would, and thankfully my partner would just, grab the boys and say, come on, guys, she wants privacy. She wants time to herself. She wants all of these things. And so I think he understood, because I couldn't fully show up in the spaces that they would need for me to show up without having that dedicated time to myself. Once I have that time, I'm all about team. I'm all about a couple. I'm all in on whatever you want to do. But I'm going to take care of me first. And then I'm going to leap into this world of Marcus, or to this world of being a mom. And so I know for some who may hear this, they may say that's selfish. I can't believe, or, thinking about that in that way. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. And 30 years in on it. So.
And look, we are unapologetic. We are not saying I'm sorry, because here's the thing. What we've talked about is you've got to do what works for you. And we have to challenge these notions of what is expected. And I'm a pretty linear thinker. And I love the push you just gave, Helen, around like, is it making the marriage work? Is actually, what's the root? What needs the marriage itself just is not, it's not working, right? It's actually, there are individuals involved to make a marriage. It takes two. And so what needs to be true for yourself as a wife, and then needs to be true for your husband. And so I love that approach, right? And I just want to, so how do you create, right, the space, right, when things are nonstop? How does it actually, in practicality, how does it look? What does it look like?
Well, I would say for probably a little unconventional for Marcus and I, only because like we lived where no family was. So we literally had to rely on each other. and again had to have like flexibility of schedules. And so that means, communicating a lot. That means also dedicating time for yourself. But what I will say was the biggest treat for us was sending our kids to Georgia every summer for at least 3 weeks. And for some reason, my parents would say, "Oh, they need rest. Ooh, they're tired. They need to reconnect," because that we were pounding the pavement. And when you live in other, New Jersey, Chicago, your commute time is long. It's not like it's the 30-minute commute time. You could literally be 2-hour commute, like both ways, wherever you are. And so it's also thinking about that in relation to your work as well. And so they would go, my mom would basically plan like a summer camp for them. And it would just be me and Marcus. And it would be things that we needed to reconnect on ourselves. But then it would also just be us outside doing yard work. And then just saying, man, like, can you believe we got time to do yard work? Or we got time to just be out here hanging out, like with each other and doing different things. Or, oh, they have a concert, like, let's go to these concerts. And we would do that when they didn't go for summer breaks. But that specific time, there are some parents who don't get 3-week dedicated time with no kids at all.
Yeah.
And when I tell you, it's a beautiful thing where you can, catch your breath. It's a beautiful thing. And so I would say that was something that has always been a gift for us, to send our kids away to our parents for like 3 weeks in the summer.
And I think modeling that, I'm so interested in what happens with your boys when and if they start their own families. Because I don't think we had probably universally models of that. And so because of that, it is unconventional. But when you do say, no, I'm a person, I need space. What? I'm going to work out. I'm resting, most either Saturday or Sunday morning, like I stay in the bed longer, and I didn't have good examples of my mom resting. And so then you do feel lazy, right? You do feel like you're supposed to be kind of Martha and, right? Because that's what you saw. And then you think about Proverbs 31 and like all of those things. So I love that you did that. And your boys get to see that. And I think I do it inconsistently more than what I saw, but probably not enough. So I'm so glad you said even something as simple as get out the bathroom.
Yes. This is my time. Yes.
Let me be the dad in the bathroom on the phone for an hour.
Don't do it like that. But setting these boundaries. I mean, it's similar to how we talk about how you allow other people to treat you. We are teaching our children how to treat us, right? How to engage with, teaching our husbands,
and how to treat their spouse.
How to teach your spouse, right?
How to treat their spouse, right? By what we do as wives, our boys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
And that modeling. And I love what you said, Helen, about the privacy. My boys 3 and 5 have picked up that language of privacy. So now that they're potty trained, they think they're grown. I need my privacy. Bet, not a problem. You can get yours as long as I get mine.
Absolutely. It's needed. You gotta have it.
Now, I love that both of you all spoke about this level of emotional intimacy. Charlitta, you spoke about how your husband really was the one who just made sure he could see you as a wife. And you're exactly right. Like no one else in this world, you are his wife. You are the only one who plays that role for him, right? He's the only one. And so I'm just curious for you, Charlitta, like what did outside of him seeing you, right, in this unique role that you needed him to see you as, what else did emotional intimacy look like for you all and has looked like over the time in this early motherhood stage?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say we have really, for me, I like to communicate. And my husband is not a communicator by trade. But he's a good listener. Or at least I think he's listening. We'll see if he references this moment in the podcast. This will be our test. This is your test. But I think he's a fairly good listener. And so I do feel like some of the things that you feel like you can't say out loud, particularly as it relates to how you're feeling, of being overwhelmed, feeling like you're drowning, you know, quite frankly, sometimes your kids have personalities, and I'm going through this right now where I'm like, I'm not exactly sure I like the way this is manifesting, like, and you don't really get to say that out loud. But I have been able to do that, like with either therapist or my husband, and to kind of talk through, like, how we're going to attack this together. Like, is this selfishness? Is this a lack of gratitude? Like, a smart alecky, whatever it is. And for me, the ability to communicate authentically, because I am very vulnerable and sometimes it can be weaponized. And so I try not to put myself in spaces where I can't be my authentic self. When I'm like, especially expressing emotional things. And so being able to be vulnerable about how I'm feeling, sometimes that's all I really need. I don't need solutions all the time. I don't need actions. I just need to get it out. And so that's how it's helped me, actually having someone I could communicate to and that would actually listen.
So important.
Yeah.
Helen, what did that look like for you? So you talked about the 3-week summer break, but as you navigated this journey, of the varying like the different stages, you talked about grief, right? As your boys were leaving, just how you maintain that emotional intimacy.
Yeah. Well, sometimes my husband acts like he's not emotional. And I have to remind him that you are a human being. Like, come on, humans have emotions. But what I will say is, he will say, "Helen, I know you." And to me, that's like a powerful thing to say when your spouse can look at you and you say nothing, and they say, "I know you." Like, I know what you're gonna say. I know what your response is gonna be. And I'm here for it. And sometimes the responses are not always positive. Sometimes they may not always be favorable. But when your husband, your man, your spouse, your boo, they can say, "But I'm here for it." I mean, that's literally like what you need, like in your marriage, what you need, like as a mom. But it's also, even we started out talking about, being multifaceted. It also is great when my husband's married to a multifaceted woman. Mark's married to a multifaceted woman. I mean, you're multifaceted. We have to have the supports that we need and these anchors that we need so that we can go do these things. I mean, imagine women who don't have that kind of support from their spouse, because this is taking your attention is taken away from, the family or the things that you need to have done. But my husband gives me the freedom to be like who I'm going to be. And I am so grateful, for that, because it could definitely be an alternative, but it's not. And even, my mom, my parents, they know that, okay, Helen can kind of be a hard person. But, she loves hard, she cherishes friendships. She cherishes the things that are so meaningful and purposeful. And my husband knows that, and he sees that. And so I'm so grateful for it.
What year does that come in? Because I'm 10 years in. And my husband still asking what I want to eat. I'm like, I'm like, how come you don't know what I want to eat now? Like, why are we still asking this question?
Girl, that is evolution right there. It didn't start out that way. I mean,
over time,
it ebbs and flows. It comes and goes. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, you know what? And he said it from the very beginning. It probably was me doing the ebb and the flowing, but it was just kind of like, oh, okay.
That's what Mark says. He's like, no, I don't necessarily bring issues. So, you tell me what's wrong.
You know what's going on.
I'm like, well, now that you asked, let me get my notebook.
Let's get to it. I love it. I love it.
Yes.
You know, Helen, as you were sharing, it was placed on my spirit that while, this conversation, this particular part of our conversation, I think is really relevant to women who are wives and mothers. But I actually think this is a powerful conversation for women who are not yet wives and mothers, and how they think about who they will partner with and who they will build a life with and build a family with. And it's so important. Again, you said it earlier, Charlitta, when you're in that premarital counseling, you're not at that point typically talking about how is it going to be with children and how are you going to support your wife who is multifaceted in career.
And you think you should get up at night.
And and in motherhood, you're not generally talking about that. But I would argue there are some signs earlier on that you can understand, is this person going to be a ride or die for me? And it made me think about, I mentioned my husband and I got married 10 years ago, 2015. And about a year after we got married, I decided I wanted to go get a doctorate. I wanted to get up and leave and move. And it would require us to move away from Boston. Both of us, for the most part, had always lived in the Southeast. He had never lived more than about 2.5 hours from his family. And when I asked him, I said, if I get in, will you go? And he said, yes, as long as I have a job. I said, well, all right. I get in. And when I tell you, this man picked up and left his career, everything, and moved. And I'm really having this aha as I'm talking to you all now. While I didn't know it then, we were still 4 or 5 years out from having children. But that is the kind of support, as you talk about multifaceted women, right? Like, that's the kind of support you want someone to be able to show up for you. There wasn't really anything he was getting out of this directly, right? He was actually making a much bigger sacrifice. But that is when you're dealing with someone and partnering with someone who's a mother, right? And the mother of your children, that's the kind of sacrifice you're going to have to give. You're going to have to support when maybe there's nothing coming back to you immediately, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I tell young girls 2 things. One, you need to be with someone who, one, sees you as the prize and they cannot believe they got you. It should not be the other way around, where you feel like you're not good enough and you can't believe you're with them. Like, you need a man who cannot believe that they got this prize. Number 2, you need someone that wants to make your life easier. And you can see that in multiple ways. My dad and my mom, they met at McDonald's where they used to work. At 16, my dad was giving my mom $5 a week so she would have more money than him.
Wow.
Like, and so now Mark wasn't doing that, but there are things that he would do because he wants my life to be easier. From when we met in high school to college to now. Like, and I think when you have that mentality, that's going to manifest at no matter what you're going through, including motherhood. And the last thing I would say that we don't talk about enough is people say marriage is just about the 2 of you, and that is not true. You are marrying a family. And that family dynamic not only impacts you, but it impacts your family. So like my parents are directly impacted by Mark's parents and his siblings and all of those things, and we do not talk about that. So those are my 3 things that I think can be applied to no matter what phase of life that you're in as a woman.
I love that. I love that. So good. Ladies, we are coming up on the hour here, and I just feel like we have covered so much, but I also know that there is so much more. What have we missed? What haven't we talked about that we want the folks to know?
One of the things that we haven't talked about is how social media impacts how you think about your marriage. I would say that there was no social media when I got married, thank God. And I think we benefited from that. We benefited from talking on the phone hours at a time, and we benefited from letter writing. And we benefited from seeing each other. My husband and I would see each other like once a month because I was either in the Northeast and he was in the South, working. And so I think social media has put a different lens on the intimacy of, relationship. So we talked a little bit about emotional, but there are intimacy in different forms of relationship building also. And so that's how we started building our relationship. And I still hold and possess all the letters that he shared with me. So if I were to gain, a whole lot of weight and he said he was going to love me anyway, of course I'm keeping that letter. I'm like, because this is what you said and we're going to hold you to it. Right. So, thankfully, I didn't have that, but I would love to know from your vantage point, do you think it impacts how you see marriage being revealed in social media today?
Undoubtedly, yes. I mean, we know social media is like the highlight reels, right? Folks are showing typically all the beauty of the glitz and glam. And so it takes a great sense of self-awareness and reality check to like not get yourself dragged into that or to get into the comparison game of that. There's a book out and I'm looking over at my bookshelf to see if I see it, but it's called Killing Comparison. And there it is by Nora Jones, right? And so making sure we're not using social media as a space to compare around what someone else has done. Because see, all we see is the 30 seconds, right? You don't see what happened before or what after. And this remote world and virtual social media world will have you thinking everybody's living that way 24/7. And it's just not. So I know for myself, I love social media just as much as the next person. Instagram, I'm still not on the TikTok. That's a little bit too much for me. The TikTok just feels like too far. But I still had a Facebook and the Instagram. And what I try to think about social media as it's another perspective to help bring something to me. But but it can easily get you in a space when you are not emotionally whole that you can lean into the comparison and start feeling different ways and down about yourself for sure.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, I think that to your point about the highlight reel, I do agree that that's real. And I think because we're always seeing it, it's kind of like it's another form of media, social media. So like the news, you can easily start to say that this is the narrative or this is what it is without thinking about it as a snapshot. And because it's sometimes hard for you to put into perspective whatever you're feeling and going through, if you're constantly seeing just happiness and you're not feeling that, it can be very lonely because you don't know what you can say or not say. You don't know how you'll be judged or not judged. And I think if more people would that show both sides and talk about both sides of, motherhood and marriage and just life, I think it would help so many people not feel like they're alone and crazy for lack of a better term. So I definitely think social media plays a part. And one of the things that I talk to my mom about is, one, there's kind of ignorance is bliss. And when I was pregnant with my son, I had a miscarriage beforehand. And, I was kind of like super stressed out going through my pregnancy with him. And she said something like, you're taking all the joy away from this. And I'm like, well, every time I go to the doctor, they can't find the heartbeat for the first 10 seconds. Right. And then you're getting all these tests because you're like advanced maternal age and a geriatric pregnancy and you're constantly worried. Right. I'm like, but when you were having kids, you had like 2 doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
One of them, you didn't even know the gender, right? Because that wasn't a thing. And so you got to be joyful because that was the narrative that was placed in you. For me, and again, I know that I see things from an anxiety-filled lens, but all I saw was all the risk.
Yeah.
And so I do think balance, and sometimes we have so much data and so much information that we know that it prevents things like we talked about before, like premature death and like all of those things. But then with that, sometimes it's hard to have the joy. And I think social media is a good example of that.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. We're coming up on time, but I don't want to leave the conversation without thinking about community, right? And what it means to create the village. I think we all believe in it does take a village to raise a child. We talked a little bit about, how, back in the day, families really, a lot of times lived close by, right? Like mama, auntie, cousins, and them, everybody was like really within close proximity. Now in a global economy, many folks, we go off to college, we find us a good job. We're not living close by family anymore. Yes, we can get there by planes and trains and whatnot, but having folks right next door and neighbors who you can really trust isn't really the case. And so, what does it look like to really build community in this day and age? And what should we really be imposing upon mothers to like think about not doing this alone, right? Because motherhood is not it's not a one person game, right? It takes definitely more than one.
Well, one thing I will say, going back to my street minister hat, so when you think about Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman, talks about how she got up early and she sewed clothes for her staff and she worked in the fields and her husband praised her and her kids called her blessed and she was an entrepreneur and like all of these things. And, there was a time where I was reading that every day and I was getting stressed out. And then God spoke to me and said, you're skipping over the part where she had staff. And it was never intended for us to do it all. Mm-hmm. It was never intended for us to do this solo. And so even if we cannot have staff, we can do things in this day and age to make our lives easier. Whether it's outsourcing laundry, whether it's going to Whole Foods and picking up a meal, whether it's, where we don't have to sew our clothes, you have somebody clean your house, and everybody has different socioeconomic statuses. So even if it's kind of coming into a village and like rotating who's doing meals for the week, like there are just ways in which we have to unlearn that in order to be a good wife and a good mom and a Black girl magic, you have to do it all, because that was never the intent. And so I would urge everyone to find ways to take some of the things that seem small. It's like, well, you know what? I could just do it. I could just do it. Those are the things that you need to let go so that you do have those moments where you are resting and demonstrating that. And you are spending that quality time with yourself, Helen, with your spouse, or with your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to commend you for reading Proverbs 31 every day, because
trying to do something that I thought I was supposed to do. Like, how do I be a virtuous woman? In that box.
I'm like, you go, girl. Okay, I'm gonna have to go read. I'm gonna have to read up on that, other than on Mother's Day. Yeah. But I will say again, my husband and I rely like a lot on each other. So I married someone who cleans, who washes clothes. Yes. I do the grocery shopping, but he'll grocery shop as well. I feel like I have to cook because he does so much of the other things. Yeah. Okay, Helen, you got to do something. I mean, he's doing all these other things. Like, do you think you can prepare the man a meal? Okay, I think I need to do something. So I will say again, that has been helpful. But then also just being in, groups like Jack and Jill, which Charlitta and I are both in, that has been like a blessed community for us. And one that I initially didn't think I actually needed. But then once my kids became a part of it, it was something that was a highlight and a joy for us, and continues, to remain that way for me. And even, in a grief moment, with me losing my dad at the early part of the year, I mean, women came to drop meals off at my house. Wow. I mean, Charlitta sent breakfast to my mom's house in Georgia, and just like the support system of, you're not alone. Like, we are here for you, even when you didn't think you needed any help. Mm-hmm. It was like, this girl ain't gonna ask for help, so this is what we're gonna do anyway. Yeah. That's how we have to kind of show up for each other. Like, even when you see something like, you know what, I'm just gonna send a card, I'm just gonna call, I'm just gonna text. But I'm also, I may come and pick up your kids. I haven't done that for Charlitta yet because her son may go with me. Her daughter, she not coming with me.
You a whole new.
Not yet. Anyway, she will. Not yet.
Uh-huh.
But I think we also have to, have that sense to say this is what's needed at that time. Sorority can be another way that, you can be supportive for each other, but just your good girlfriends, your church friends, your faith community, all of those things. And I mean, I live my life in faith as well. And I mean, without the Heavenly Father, guiding and pushing me and showing me the people who actually need to be in my circle, that also has been a blessing for me as well.
Yeah. I love that so much because it is both asking for what you need, right? Closed mouths don't get fed, but it's also positioning yourself in community with others who will show up for you without you asking. Because sometimes you don't know what you need. Sometimes you may not have the strength to ask for what it is you need. So having folks around you who basically say, I see you. So I'm going to do, right? When you see something, say something, do something. I see you straight. Like when my girlfriends, I still have girlfriends who are having, children. What do you need? Girl, I'm just going to send you a meal. What you mean? What do I need? Like, why ask a new mom, what does she need? Like, no, I'm just going to send you a meal. Right?
Yes.
And so just having folks around you, right, who can do that and can be in sync and in spirit with you is phenomenal. And this idea of outsourcing, let me tell you, baby, anything I do not like doing that takes away from my joy is somebody I can pay to do that. Because my joy, I have to be responsible for my happiness. I have to. And so if there are things that I'm just like, that is not my ministry, it is going to drain me, I'm going to find someone who I can pay, who can do it, and is much more expert at it than I am.
And I tell people all the time, you're not going to see me drenched in designer. I don't have a whole bunch of designer bags and shoes and all that because I would rather pay somebody to come clean my house. And we all spend every week, and we all spend our money the way we want to spend it.
Yep.
And if you don't have the money, because some of this is, from a point of privilege, there are communities that you can build. I know at one point, like I was in a rotating meals circle with my girlfriend, and one of us would pick, which week we were going to make, like meals for the week, and then we shared between the three houses, and then the next week the next person did it. I mean, so there are ways in which you can. I know people who do babysitters that way, where, each family takes a week where they get to go out and the other family is watching the kid that week. I mean, so, that's, I think, that point too of the importance of community, because it doesn't all have to cost when you have that village.
Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up, I'd love for each of us to share one piece of truth or encouragement for any mom who's out there navigating motherhood, identity, marriage, or even just loneliness right now. What would we offer?
Say you are enough.
Oh, go ahead, Charlitta.
I'll say you are enough. And however you're feeling, you are not alone. And how you're feeling, we don't have it all figured out. I think as your kids go through different phases, you go through a different phase, and it's okay for you to change and evolve, and not to feel like something is wrong.
Yeah. And of course, I'm going to say self-care. Make certain you're taking care of yourself, and whatever that looks like for you. For some, that could look like a spa. For some, it could just be a walk just to get some fresh air outside. For some, it could be reading a book or listening to music or learning a new line dance or, boots on the ground, whatever you need to do. But, have some fun and excitement about yourself. And then the other part that I would say, trust yourself, trust your village.
I love that. I think what I would offer, is that there are different seasons of life, and every season brings something, lessons to be learned, sometimes some losses, but remembering that it's a season of life. And over time, right, it will get better. But, hold on, use these great tools. You are enough. Engage in some self-care. Find you a village of support. And in this season, you can get through. You can get through. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining this episode. This has been just a pure joy. When I tell y'all, this came together in about a week and a half?
Yeah, it was awesome.
We got some bad girls now. Look, I don't know. You give us something, we can change the world in just a little bit of time. So it has been a pure joy, special collaboration episode between Live with Thrive and the co-host of Behind the Throne, Helen Hope Kimbrough and Charlitta Latch. I want to get this tag back up, make sure it is correct. Behind the Throne 04. Please follow and listen. Behind the Throne is on all major streaming platforms, as well as Live with Thrive. You don't have to be perfect, ladies. This is about growing. It's about learning. You may stumble, but keep blooming. Until next time, take care and keep thriving. Thanks for joining us. Bye.